Welcome back to the Making the Madness Team Preview Series. Today we will be breaking down the Oregon Ducks.
The starters for the Oregon Ducks this season will be point guard Will Richardson. At the two, transfer from UNLV Amari Hardy. At the three, former JUCO star Chris Duarte. At the four, Chandler Lawson. And at the five, Nafali Dante.
Yeah, looking at this team, I think the backcourt is going to be strong. I really like Chris Duarte to have a big breakout season. Was former JUCO Player of the Year, now going to be uh, kind of thrown into a role where I think he along with Will Richardson, they're going to have to be the two alphas for this team offensively with Peyton Pritchard gone. I would look for both Richardson and Duarte to probably average somewhere in the range of like 15 points per game for the Ducks this season.
Yeah, definitely. I know you're big on Chris Duarte, and rightfully so. He's a pretty good all-around player. But I'm big on Will Richardson. If For the people who've read my work about the Pac-12 in the past few months, I've hyped up Will Richardson a lot. Actually, the first thing I ever wrote for the site back in May was about Oregon, and I'm just big on Will Richardson. He had off the bench last season like 12 a game, shot nearly 50% from deep, only 84 attempts, so take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But he really improved from his freshman season. He's a really good passer. He's a decent defender, not elite, but pretty good. He runs an offense well, and he's just a crafty scorer. You look at that Arizona game, the one they won in overtime. He had 20, I think 20 flat. I'm pretty sure, but he was huge that game. And when Peyton Pritchard struggled, the very few times he struggled, Will Richardson picked up the slack. I think he's gonna have a fantastic season, and he's my pick for preseason Pac-12 Player of the Year.
Yeah, and I think the player I would look to. I know you're big on Richardson. I like Duarte. I remember the USC game earlier this year. I think they needed double overtime to win, but Duarte had 30 in that game. He's just a good scorer, and he'll definitely be good. Amari Hardy, I think, adds some like a veteran presence. He can play kind of on and off ball. He can shoot. Like he's a good playmaker. I think that pairs well with those two, and then obviously the front court. You have some good pieces. Lawson, Nafali Dante. That's a good duo. So realistically, the Ducks have all that. They have all the ducks in the row, as they would say.
Yeah, definitely. I like Nafali Dante a lot. He's a guy who reclassified into the 2019 class, originally a member of the 2020 class. Yeah, and one thing to remember about him is that he didn't play until late December. He wasn't eligible for the first semester just due to like late paperwork, I think. So that was tough to get into the fold once you miss half of the season, and he struggled with injuries at times. He showed that he's a pretty good scorer. He's an old school big man. We say this for like all big men. I feel like you can't shoot. He's kind of like Udoka Azubuike, but I kind of see that a lot with him. He just needs to be a more consistent rebounder, not foul, and I think he could be really good. And it just shows that he's a former top 10 recruit. He just needs to be consistent. He'll show that easily.
Yeah, and the thing about Dante too is like coming in mid-season. With we talk a lot about the like mid-season transfer. Well, mid-season joining the team as a freshman. That's most of the times not a recipe for success. I think if he doesn't reclassify and just stays in the class and commits to Oregon, we're talking in much different light about Nafali Dante than we would be having seen what probably was the worst of him uh, while he was at Oregon. We got we got the worst out of him, but I think like if what I'm trying to say is like if he stays in high school, doesn't or reclassify, doesn't go to Oregon, and he still is a top 10 recruit. We're talking about him as being like this huge impact player, but instead, I think that kind of gets knocked down a level. But Dante should be good this year. What should be his real freshman season, although he did reclass last year.
Yeah, definitely. And just finishing up my point on Dante, he only played 12 games last year, and the most minutes he had in the game was 22 against Alcorn State, and then after that, the most he had was 19 against Arizona in that overtime game that they won. And he had 10 points and 5 boards in that game. I just think that I'm not sure if he was even allowed to practice with the team when he wasn't eligible. So it's tough to get, that continuity with the team, a very veteran laden team that you hadn't practiced with at all.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's part of the issues he had. Chandler Lawson, I think, should be better as well. I really like this starting five. I think it good guard play, good forward play. Would maybe like Shakur Justin to still be on the team, but can't really do that at the moment. So it's a good roster though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming off the bench for the Ducks will be Eric Williams Jr., Addison Patterson, Eugene Umurari, Jalen Terry, and Luke Ward. They could also add like an LJ Figueroa who could get a waiver to play this season. He isn't uh, technically slated to play, but obviously I think mentioning Figueroa, he would probably move into the starting lineup and move Amori Hardy to the bench. Uh, what do you like about this kind of bench? I think it's a really good bench that's deep and has like versatility as well.
Yeah, definitely. You have a mix of things on this bench. You have guys who have played at a high level, like Eugene Omori at Rutgers for a number of years, 3 years, wasn't able to be a graduate transfer. Eric Williams played a couple seasons at Duquesne, was a big time impact player. Then you have a guy like Locke Work, who redshirted last season for Oregon. And then you have a guy like Jalen Terry, who's a top 100 recruit this season. So you just have a mixed bag of guys who have experienced a lot of different things in the basketball world in the past few seasons. But I think the veteran leadership of Omori and Eric Williams Jr. will be big. I'm not sure what kind of production they'll put up. I think Williams is a better player. But if they could put up 20 minutes a game each, replace Lawson if he's struggling, that'd be big. And Addison Patterson was also a top 50 recruit last year. I'd like to see him take a step up this season.
Yeah, definitely. I think you mentioned Amori. I think he's kind of the key play piece. I could see him even potentially starting over Chandler Lawson or Dante if one of them struggles. But Amori's he brings in experience. He can play the four. I think it's a perfect kind of. He's an undersized kind of four man. I think that's a good fit. You can add positional versatility at the four spot when Lawson or Dante go to the bench. I just think that's a good mix. So I'm really excited to see Eugene Umurari.
Yeah, definitely. And Jalen Terry, a very talented guard, who's a top 100 recruit. I don't envision a huge role for him this season. Like, he'll play, but it's hard for me to imagine him getting minutes over Richardson, over Hardy, over Duarte. They just have a lot of depth, and I think Terry's going to take a back seat this season. But you mentioned LJ Figueroa, a guy who was pretty incredible 2 seasons ago for the St. John's Red Storm, struggled last season with injuries and just playing well in general. But 2 seasons ago, when he wasn't the focal point of the Red Storm offense with Shamori Pons there, he was pretty fantastic. Last season, as the main guy, took a huge step back. If he can get a waiver, this Oregon team takes a big step up.
Definitely.
The departures for the Oregon Ducks, we'll start off with the transfers. They lose a pair of them. Francis Okoro is transferred to St. Louis. C.J. Walker is transferred back home to UCF. Pac-12 Player of the Year Peyton Pritchard is graduated, as have Shakur Houston and Anthony Mathis.
Yeah, I think the key one is Peyton Pritchard. I think with Oregon last year, they had a lot of games where they just would struggle, but having Peyton Pritchard out there just getting buckets, going out and making plays late in games just to carry the team essentially to a Pac-12 title, that's irreplaceable. I think he was a well worthy first team All American. I would, if you told me who's a more valuable player to their team, Luka Garza or Peyton Pritchard, I would have said Peyton Pritchard just myself. I think he's that important to what Oregon did, but I think he is going to be the huge loss here.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Peyton Pritchard. What can we even say that'll like show how good of a season he had last year? Like he just had so many big moments, and he's just a player made for March. You look at what he did. I'll just read his stats real fast. 20 and a half points per game, 4.3 boards a game, 5.5 assists per game. That's fantastic while shooting 46% from the field and 41% from deep. And you look at the career trajectory of Peyton Pritchard. He's a guy who started his career. He started pretty much. I can check that here. He started every single game except for 4 in his freshman season. Started on that Final Four team his freshman season, and the role he had as a freshman. That's a team that had Dylan Brooks, Tyler Dorsey, Jordan Bell, Chris Boucher, and he was the fifth scoring option on that team, really. And then as time went on, he became the guy, which is it's just like speaks to the kind of different roles he can play. And for NBA teams, it has to be something that makes you excited about him. He was just fantastic this year. You look at the dagger three he hit against Washington from like 35 feet. He was one of my favorite players to watch this season.
Definitely. And then Anthony Mathis brings some shooting. I think Shakur Juiston, I mentioned it earlier, he would be a perfect fit as like a small ball four on this year's team. I think Oregon, obviously losing Pritchard's going to be the biggest loss, but Juiston's no big loss either. And then Okoro and Walker, I think, are the two that make the most sense. I think both transferred, and Oregon front court wise is just absolutely loaded. So it makes sense for both of those players to transfer.
Yeah, I agree in a sense. CJ Walker, I think, would have played a role this season. I was kind of, surprised to see him transfer, but he did say it was to go back home, and he's from Florida. He could have went to Florida or Florida State, and I think they would have taken him in a heartbeat. But he went to the school closest to home, which was UCF. So his heart was definitely in the right place with his transfer. It's hard to blame a guy who wants to go back home during a global pandemic, and that's what he decided to do. I think he will be a big loss. I think people forget McDonald's All American. He might be the most athletic player I've ever seen. Like that man, some of the Twitter videos he posts, dunking over like 4 people, it's just insane to me. I think he'll be a pretty big loss. Anthony Mathis, I think, is going to be another big loss. One of the best shooters in college basketball the past few seasons. Just a sharp shooter. Wasn't as good as I thought he was going to be this season. I don't think they used him right, but Mathis was a good player.
Yeah, definitely. So looking forward to this upcoming season. A couple questions about this team. The first one: can they win the Pac-12? Uh, I think the answer is yes. I would still say Arizona State's the team to beat, but Oregon certainly has everything you want in place. They have the talent, they have the coaching. This is just a really well built together team that can certainly win the Pac-12.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more. You're right there with Arizona State being the favorite. I'd be pretty hard pressed to find anybody who thinks that preseason Oregon should be ahead of them. I think they're both top 15 teams without a doubt. I just think Arizona State, with the guard depth they have, they can get it done down low. But the system is that Bobby Hurley runs is 4 guards to run and to run fast, and they have a lot of guys who can do that. But for Oregon, I have them second in the Pac-12. I think Will Richardson's gonna be the Pac-12 Player of the Year. And after that, I think it's Arizona State, a tiny gap, then Oregon, then a pretty significant gap. Then I would have UCLA in the like mid to late 20s in my top 25. I think UCLA is a good team too. We'll get into them a couple weeks down the line, maybe we'll see. But Oregon, I do think absolutely has a chance to win the Pac-12.
Yeah, I would probably, if I were going to position the Pac-12, I think Arizona State's the favorite to win it, but I would probably put Oregon in the UCLA tier where they're kind of like the second tier team. I think UCLA just has a lot returning that, especially in a shortened season, they'll have kind of the void. They like all their players know what they're doing, at least as the team. So I would say UCLA would probably be better at least early on in the season, while Oregon has a few more pieces that need to prove some things. But certainly Oregon will be good, and you know my money's on Arizona State, but or Oregon's going to be good. They're going to be once again competing, for a potential second weekend, which brings me to the second question. Is this a second weekend team?
I think yes, for sure. I think this is a team that, could even make the Final Four. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Am I gonna predict them to make the Final Four? No. I'm sure. Where would you have them in your bracketology if you were doing one right now, like a 5 seed?
I would say maybe a little bit lower. I'd probably say like 6 or 7 seed or something like
Six
that.
or seven seed. Yeah, that's pretty fair, and I think they could eventually be a 2, 3, 4. I think this is a team that can definitely turn some heads in March. They have everything you want. This is two things I talk about all the time that will take you to the promised land in March. The two keys to success is guard play, which they have with Will Richardson, Amari Hardy, Chris Duarte, and veteran leadership, which they have with Will Richardson, Amari Hardy, Chris Duarte, the two transfers, Omori and Eric Williams Jr. Those are the two things that can carry you in March. Depth also, they have that. This is a team that can play 9 or 10 deep fairly easily. I think this is absolutely a team that can make the Sweet 16 Elite 8.
Yeah, and you mentioned that depth. That's where I really, really like this Oregon team. I think the depth is just really fantastic with this team, and is probably the reason I like this Oregon team, because they have so many good players that they can do a lot of different things as a team. Having the ability to bring Omori off the bench is going to be huge for this team. I just really like the depth of this Ducks team. I think it can sustain some good success not only in the Pac-12 but in the NCAA tournament.
100%. Couldn't agree more.